there. But Terence, he had a feeling of guilt, he and McCurtain, because the rising did not extend to Cork. And I remember him saying during his hunger strike that now his failure, he always spoke of it as his failure, in Cork was vindicated. I think he felt that by his hunger strike he had done something peculiarly great, you know, and upbuilding in the national movement, which of course he had. There's no question about that. But he himself was a lovely man. When you saw him walking along the street, he used to wear a raincoat, always open. I never saw it shut. Flying behind him, and he walked so quickly, always hurrying to get. I think he must have felt his life wasn't going to be very long, and that everything he did had to be done presto, you know, in order to get it finished in time. And he, always with his head up, he used to remind me of the prow of a ship, you know, something like that. Extraordinary, full of vitality, full of eagerness. I remember that some of the volunteers didn't appreciate his tactics because they said that he was rushing them too much and treated them a bit as schoolboys. But I think he knew he hadn't long, and I think he knew this job had to be done fast, you know. However, he did it, and did it amazingly well. His tastes were, of course, literary. He wrote a good deal. I don't think very well. I think he had too much to do and hadn't time enough. The best thing he ever wrote was The Principles of Freedom, which is a series of essays. Very good, very, very good. They were lovely. But when he married first then, which was in 1917, June 1917, he was then interned in a place called Bromyard. It's near the Herefordshire border in England. And it was this very small little country place, lovely little place, greatly wooded. And there was only a tiny little shanty of a church there. It was built by the priest of the place. He was a Belgian, Father Denis Mathieu. And he built it with his own hands and aided by a couple of his parishioners. And they were married in that little church. I was there for a fortnight, staying with Muriel before they were married, and I was her bridesmaid, of course. And then I learned to know Terry as a very lovable person in that time, almost more so than when he was in Cork, because in Cork he was liable to be called out, and then he always had a bodyguard with him, you know, and you couldn't talk in any way privately. This big man was there, and you felt the presence of guns and things. But it was a romantic episode too. There were only his two sisters, Dick Mulcahy, who was best man, Father Augustine, who married them, and the little Belgian priest of the place. That was the wedding party. And Muriel looked beautiful. She was a very, very lovely looking girl at that time. Good deal younger than Terry, of course. And he created a great sensation because he wore his coat, his raincoat, going to the church, buttoned, closely buttoned. And then when he got to the church and Muriel arrived, he took the coat off and he was in uniform, you see. And this caused a great splash of astonishment thing, because they never saw him before. And the landlady was very funny. I mean, Muriel's landlady and mine. She suddenly said, "But Mrs. MacSwiney," she said, "your husband is an officer." These roundabout things. And our status shot up immensely at that time. The uniform, of course, was smuggled over. Dick Mulcahy's uniform was to have been smuggled over, and most of it was. But there was one piece got lost. I forget which piece now, the tunic, I think. And he had to wear his ordinary clothes, which was a pity. And then the wedding was in Irish, and the registrar was very flummoxed over this, but he wasn't so flummoxed as not to demand a repeat performance in English so that he could know what they were talking about. So we had the two. We had good value for our money. And then they broke, he, during his internment there, it was a sort of a house internment, it wasn't a close one. He could travel within 5 miles, but he broke through the barrier and went 10 miles to a place called Ledbury, where Tomas McCurtain was, and he wanted to see the boys there. And he and Muriel went off there on their honeymoon. We came back then. I seemed to be always coming back in the big themes of Terry's life. I was coming back in this with his corpse later on.